Hello and welcome to Liquid Future. Today we are interviewing Agatha Basilar. Agatha is running for U.S. Congress in a pretty challenging seat, not to pull punches, but Agatha is running against Nancy Pelosi here in San Francisco in CA District 12. Thank you very much for joining us, Agatha. Just to get started, can you tell us a little bit about why you're running and what your campaign's all about?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on, David. So I'm running for Congress now. I just announced a few weeks ago. Prior to becoming a candidate for U.S. Congress, I was studying product design at Stanford, mostly focused on social impact projects and solutions to poverty. And then I spent 5 years working for the Emerson Collective, where I was doing documentary storytelling and advocacy around issues related to education, immigration, criminal justice, and the environment. So part of that experience brought me to these places where justice is most urgently needed, and I felt like I knew too much and saw too much to not want to do more. And I'm coupling that experience with my other experience of helping to start Democracy Earth, which is an organization that's at the intersection of the internet and democracy, where we've built a blockchain-based voting platform. And so I think those two experiences with this campaign, I hope to upgrade our Congress to be more reflective of the people and more responsive to the people in real time.
Fantastic. And we have a previous interview with Santi that was so much fun. We ran out of time. We were both starving at a certain point. We were going for hours and we had to break. So we need to get Santi back on. Again, just in case anyone doesn't remember, Santi is also working on Democracy Earth. And so previously, you and I have spoken separately about some of the ways in which the current U.S. Congress is lacking what we'd expect from it in 2019. So can you just speak to that? In what ways would you like to see U.S. Congress improve?
The whole point of why I'm here is because I believe that we are smart enough to shape our future and that we don't have to settle with the status quo and inherit these political systems that we've been left with. So in working on advocacy issues, I was really frustrated where, let's say I was working on immigration. That's something that I've been championing since I was in high school. It's been over a decade, trying to get a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. And it doesn't matter whether a majority of Americans want something based on polling or whether a majority of Congress members would vote for something, or even if it makes logical sense or economic sense, things tend to get stuck because of certain corporate interests or the way government operates today. And as a citizen, our only outlets are to march on the streets, which is powerful but doesn't have true institutional direct value. Or you have to call your member of Congress, which is not up to speed with how we communicate today. Or you have to wait an entire election cycle to vote a single person out of office, even if it's one specific issue that you really had a problem with. So I'm hoping that we can use digital tools to express majority interest in real time.
Beautiful. Couldn't be in better company, obviously. That's exactly what I and everyone working on this stuff all think. It's about time. It's overdue, really. And there's so many other tools we use that have seen a lot of care and attention put in them to make a better experience for the people on the other end using them. And our democracy is really just stuck in centuries-old thinking. And we see so many signs of that and so much dissatisfaction and so many people just so frustrated with the system that they're totally opting out. So very happy to hear you be a strong champion for these ideas. So previously we had spoken about the idea of a liquid candidate and this notion of being completely controlled by digital voting, and you've said hopefully that's a place we can get to in the future, but it's probably too early for that, which is a very reasonable position to take. But can you speak more to filling in the role of a traditional candidate, the specific views and policies that you're really excited to champion as an individual, the things that you think are most needed and that aren't really seeing as strong of a voice right now in our representation?
Yeah, so I could speak about a few different issues. One is especially if I'm speaking as hopefully a representative of San Francisco, this is a very young, diverse, technologically advanced district. And I think that we could be leaders in reshaping our government and talking about certain issues. So the largest voting bloc in San Francisco are millennials, people aged 17 to 35. And we have a lot of STEM talent here. Right now, only 10% of Congress has any sort of STEM background, and I'd like to contribute to increasing that number. And that has to do with issues like climate change, that it's not even an issue anymore, it's an emergency, that we have a very limited few years to turn the ship around. And also big money in government is a huge one. About 80% of Americans want to see a reversal of Citizens United, and that's why I'm running my campaign as a grassroots campaign that's not accepting any corporate PAC money and is a very different stance from the incumbent.
To an extreme.
Yeah. Talked about immigration. Criminal justice. I don't think we truly live in a democracy based on how we treat people of color and how we've not evolved from this myth of racial difference, and that's something that I would love to do more work on. Yeah.
So just wonderful. Those are all issues near and dear to my own heart. Just to dig in a little deeper, one topic that we've talked about a lot on this channel is about money and politics. So are there particular solutions that you're the most excited about? Yeah.
There was one organization that I got lightly involved in called American Promise.
Yeah.
You know about them?
Amendment.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Okay, so yeah, they're trying to ratify a 28th Amendment, which would require a constitutional convention. 2/3 of states would have to call for it. And it's a challenge. We only created 12 amendments in the 1900s, and the last time we did it was the year that I was born in 1992. But there is movement towards it. I think there's there's 20 states already who have called for it, and over 200 members of Congress who said that they would vote for it. So that's one opportunity. I also love seeing this movement where, for the presidential election, most candidates have recused corporate back money, but that movement hasn't taken effect so much in Congress. That's still very much entrenched in lobbyist and corporate money. And so I hope we see more candidates rising up to have grassroots campaigns. And then it's just more transparency in general. It's one of the reasons why I believe in hopefully eventually being a member of Congress that makes decisions informed by how constituents vote on a digital platform. And we can by being transparent about what people think and what I'm working on, we could also be transparent about money. Where is it coming from and how are we spending it?
Yeah. Those are all exciting. There's a part of me just to be forward about it. When you're talking about candidates self-electing not to accept corporate PAC money, there's something incredibly noble about that. There's also something about it that makes a part of me think, oh no, that will put the candidates that I really like and admire at this disadvantage compared to the other candidates that don't have as much integrity. And so just to really bring it home, I think there was a headline just from yesterday. The GOP, the official GOP party, the RNC, was announcing that Donald Trump just broke a new record. He officially announced his campaign for re-election in 2020 2 days ago or yesterday. I'm blanking now. And they said in his first 24 hours of his campaign, he's raised $24.6 million, which is a new American record. I mean, a boatload of money very quickly. And so I guess the question is just, does self-electing not to take more money, I don't know. To me, the issue is that there are these structural problems in the way our democracy is formed. And so if all of the people with the ideas that I really want to hear more of are putting themselves a handicap, does that mean that our elected representatives will get even worse? Do you have an intuition about that?
Yeah. In some way, running this way is actually an advantage because it attracts a lot of interest and money and donations, but certainly only incrementally. It's much easier to get one check for $200,000 from one source than it is to try to raise that from a bunch of individuals.
So now that you're on the campaign trail, you've been talking a little about these ideas of liquid democracy. You had this really great profile the other day, a long form profile. What's your response been as you've been bringing these ideas out to people that are new to these concepts?
Yes, coming from the democracy earth world into the regular everyday constituent world, those are very different. And yeah, it's very clear that liquid democracy, delegated voting, digital civic tech, that are still very much in these bubbles, and we're not quite there yet. So even though I am, as a candidate, excited about these ideas and committed to implementing them once there's a threshold and a certain viability, for now, I think there's so much work to be done. And unless there's the education or the access there, the idea is dead on arrival in a way. So we still need to communicate with people. Like, if there's someone who's struggling just to make ends meet and trying to convince them why they should download this thing, or how does it work? What is quadratic voting? Who can I delegate to? How often do I use this? And trying to change that behavior, there's still so much work to be done. And I'm excited to help work on it, because I think our leaders right now who are in power aren't going to be the ones that are going to lead us into this new future with new forms of power and alternative forms. So yes, it's going over people's heads a little bit, and which is why I'm mostly running as a traditional candidate, but still also doing conversations like this to get the word out.
Totally. And yeah, just speaking personally, when I was a candidate last year, when I'd say, "Hi, I'm David, I'm running for office," they'd say, "What are you running about?" I say, "I'm running to end corruption, to fight corruption, to make our democracy much less corrupt." That was very simple headline. For a lot of people, that was like, "Oh, yeah, exactly. That's what we need." It seems like everyone can agree with that. Some people, they'd want to get into more details, and so then we'd have this conversation about what 21st democracy could look like. But that's the formulation that I found, being on the street, handing out flyers, and very tight interactions works the best for me.
We have very little time with each constituent.
Yeah, insanely little. So one topic. So let's go back to the particulars of your race. So the incumbent has been in office for
longer than I've been alive.
Many decades. What are the issues in particular where you think that she's in the wrong, that she holds the wrong position, or the position that you think we ought to be moving towards?
Yeah, so we've touched a bit on this, but certainly we can talk about money in politics, the environment, healthcare, and impeachment are top of mind. So money in politics, Speaker Pelosi, while I recognize that as a young woman I wouldn't be able to run if I were not standing on her shoulders, and I can't imagine what she went through being an early feminist in our political system. But I don't mean to point finger at an individual, because there's a system that encourages this, but she is the 15th wealthiest member of Congress, worth almost $100 million. And if you look at her contributions, where she gets funding from, you could say there's a correlation between that flow of income and how she makes decisions. So if we talk about healthcare, I was recently at the Democratic State Convention, and one of the biggest things I saw people begging for with chants and signs and tons of volunteers was single-payer healthcare. While I am so happy that the Affordable Care Act made progress and helped millions of people get healthcare and insurance, I would say that it actually helped insurance companies the most. And if you look at Pelosi's donations, her second larger donor base is healthcare industry and insurance companies, which I think has to do with why we make excuses for why we can't move towards Medicare for all. talk about the environment. Also, tons of money from oil and gas. And this stance on the green dream or whatever is the exact opposite of what we need. We're facing an existential crisis. And then impeachment as well. I think it's Congress's job to start the process and educate the people on what all the indictments are. And this political calculus, I think it's much more detrimental to not impeach than to impeach and worry about those repercussions.
And can you speak more to the partisanship in the country right now? So I think one issue that I think for a lot of people, when they think about Nancy Pelosi, they think of her not so much as the San Francisco representative, but as the Democratic Party. And in that sense, like the opposition to Trump. So, for example, the thing that she most recently that were big headlines about her was the shutdown back in January. And there were these meetings with Chuck Schumer and Pelosi and Trump where the headlines were all about, oh, Pelosi just schooled Trump or this or that or the other. So yeah, can you speak to how does your candidacy play into this red team versus blue team tug of war that's so deeply gripped our country over the last few years? And where would you like to see our national conversation move to?
Yeah, a few layers there. Okay, so one about standing up to Trump. I see this in a way as how Winston Churchill led Britain to win World War II, but then was not reelected right away. So he did the job that he was in the position to do, and people were grateful for that, but then also had the recognition of passing on the baton and going into a future without Churchill. So I'm grateful Pelosi standing up to Trump and schooling him or whatnot, but also she's not standing up to him in terms of not starting an impeachment process, which I think is ceding power and legitimacy to him and his office and how he's behaving. I have been told by some skeptics that, oh, why am I trying to run against Pelosi because she's standing up to Trump and I'm creating this war on two fronts for her. I disagree with that because I think by being Speaker of the House, you do have more of a national responsibility, and so it is her job to whip votes from the Democratic Party and get people on board that both come from progressive places like San Francisco and Midwestern districts that just were recently red and just turned blue, and so that's a precarious seat. But this incrementalism is not what we need right now. We need a more unifying platform that will help everyday Americans. And I come from a family that's split. I'm originally from Brazil, and so I have my Brazilian side and my American side. My family members live in Michigan and South Carolina and Florida, and most of them are Republicans who voted for Trump, are big fans of his, and I actually look forward to every family reunion when we get to talk to them, because I think the decisions that people make sense to them based on their lived experience or based on where they get their information. And so being able to have all these kinds of conversations and find common ground and get to the root of what do we all really want is a very unifying conversation. And I'm excited for my generation to be more open to that. I think it's 44% of millennials are independent or not registered to a party. So I'm excited for that.
Totally. Yeah, and it seems like so much of the attack on the Democratic Party is actually more an attack on Nancy Pelosi herself in other countries, in other states. She herself seems to be a deeply unpopular figure. So many of the commercials and attack ads in places that aren't San Francisco are specifically calling her out by name. And so I wonder, I think that for a lot of Americans, there's just not a ton of trust there, if that makes sense. And if it's not possible that I mean, she's been in office for a long time, and there's a lot to be admired there. But at the same time, like, she's also overseen so many of the messes that we find ourselves in, and so it'd be great if we had more options. And I feel like as a country, we're extremely paralyzed by having this such a reductionist red-blue binary, and that's all it's about. You want to speak to that?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that the American people deserve politicians that emerge from a competition of ideas. And it's the whole reason that I even moved to California when I was 18, is I was looking at different colleges, and I got into some East Coast schools and did the campus tours. And I just felt like Stanford in particular, but this area of Silicon Valley in general, it didn't matter so much how you were dressed or what your last name was, how much money you came from. It was people talking about ideas, and everyone was welcome at the table. And so, yes, I am excited for this future where all kinds of first-time, diverse candidates can come into our political system and inject it with a flurry of new ideas, and we don't have to settle with the status quo.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And so I want to shift the conversation a little bit just to longer term. So we did this event. For anyone that doesn't know, you and I and a few other people got to do this event at the Civic Bar Manny's recently, and we should have a video of that going up soon. But one thing you mentioned there on stage was about this book, Architecture of a Techno Democracy. So can you speak to that and speak to what's possible long term? I hate to admit it, but I haven't actually had a chance to read the book yet. But I want to read it as soon as possible. So please fill us in. What's going on there?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So the Architecture of a Techno Democracy, it was written by a former FBI whistleblower, a candidate that ran for Senate, and a lawyer. And it's all about how we can upgrade our democracy to empower the 100%. So one of the ways that he writes about the history of this country in that book is that at independence, the U.S. transitioned from the rule of one person, King George III, to the rule of a 1% system that we have now, which is Congress and money. One of the ways you can see that is that 1% of people on Earth own more than 50% of the wealth on the planet. And how we have this political system where it's what we were talking about earlier, it's so challenging and so costly to get one person elected through that machine. Whereas now, 230 years after independence, we finally have the technology and the means to build systems that empower 100% of Americans, all within the current political, economic, legal framework that we have today. And it was one of the books that really was the straw that broke the camel's back and made me excited to run, because I'm not so interested in running a campaign the same way it's been done in the past, and I'm not interested in replacing one person in power with myself in power. I am interested in bringing the people of San Francisco to a seat in Congress, and he lays out the ways that technology can get us there.
Can you speak to that more?
Sure. So, and I think it really resonates with what you're working on. So how we could elect candidates who commit to making decisions based on how people would vote on a digital platform, that every American has the right to own their communication power, options, decision-making, and accountability. And a way of doing that is using these open source, secure, decentralized systems to build civic tools where if someone wants to run, it's easy and affordable. And you can see all your candidates, you can vote on them, you can see all the bills that are being voted on the floor of Congress, and you can either vote direct. Okay, so you have a few options. The default would be that your vote would go to your representative, as we do now have a representative system. But if you are someone who is knowledgeable or passionate about an issue, you could vote directly on that. And if you're somewhere in between, and let's say you have a friend or someone in your community that you do find to be, that you trust, you could delegate your vote to them, and now they have more voting power to make a decision. And I find that so exciting that I just couldn't sit and not do more about it.
Yeah. If I remember right, you actually said reading this book is what convinced you to run for office.
Yeah. I had been thinking about it a while more in a traditional sense. And then this was a thing where I was like, okay, wow, this is different enough. And I still have not met another person who's read this book. So I felt like, okay, I'll do it.
You met with Jason. But
Yeah.
I haven't read the book yet.
Yeah.
So what do you think we need? What's the gap between where we are today and this techno-democratic future? What do we need to do to get there?
We need to do some pilots. So I know Liquid.us, we're going to work together, and I'll just start being an official candidate on there who stakes my vote and makes clear how I would vote. I would be interested in making a minimum viable product and going into the communities that we find would be most challenging. Maybe people who don't speak English, or people who aren't on Facebook, or people who are not sheltered at the moment, and testing out what messaging resonates with them, how easy is it to download, is it on everyone's phone, or are there kiosks around town? We still need to solve the identity issue. So something that I've talked with a few politicians about is how social media is a great tool in that it democratizes access to communication and your representatives, but it's overwhelming because there's no verification system around the identity piece. So a member of Congress doesn't know if someone who's yelling about an issue is actually a Russian troll or a constituent in their district. So finding a way where we can verify identity and prove that only one person has one profile on this platform and you are who you say you are. There's some people working on this, and I think once we solve that would be critical for so many things in the tech space.
Yeah, fantastic. Lots there for us to follow up about. Super exciting. What message would you like the voters in San Francisco to be aware of? What do you want people to know is now possible, is now in their reach?
When we talk about the debate around moving towards digital voting, for a long time the criticism was that our digital infrastructure was based on centralized servers that were either owned by a corporation or a government entity, and there was a single point of failure. If you hack these servers, then all that data is out and can be manipulated and changed on the back end, so there wasn't trust in the system. Now, with blockchains and this decentralized world that we're in, it's much more secure. There's still a lot to be worked on in terms of, but yeah, we're finally in this time where we can move to digital voting in a safe, secure way. And I'd also encourage voters to give me a chance at the primary. So the goal is to get second place right behind Nancy Pelosi. And because California has a jungle primary where 2 Democrats could go and advance to the general election, that'd be really exciting to finally get to talk about these things on a national stage, to be able to debate them. No female Democrat has seriously challenged Speaker Pelosi or had a debate in, I think, since the 80s. So please vote for me on March 3rd, and you can even start early voting in February.
Okay, so just getting again into the specifics of your campaign. Right now, it's June 2019. So the first race is the primary in March 2020, so about 9 months from now. And as you were saying, we in California use this top two system. So it's not a party-based primary. In theory, two Democrats can make it through. So between now and 9 months from now, it's not quite so much about you versus Speaker Pelosi, but it's about who is even going to be the opponent to Speaker Pelosi. So what exactly is it that makes you the right choice? Just again, to sum it up. And the follow-up point to that is, what can people do to help make this happen?
Right. So there are two others, so three total, who are challenging the incumbent. And I'd say we have very similar progressive views. And I think the person who will win will have a great ground game and be a great organizer, which I certainly believe in. I come from a background where I worked with organizers and saw major transformations that we didn't think possible. And I believe in that power so much. I think it takes educating, organizing, talking to voters, one voter at a time. But I also think why I stand out, first of all, there's this entire conversation that we had around technology and the intersection of social justice that I uniquely bring to the table. But also the demographics that are at play in San Francisco, the largest voting bloc are millennials, are my peers, are people who typically are engineers. I think we have enough lawyers in Congress right now, and I think we need more systems thinkers, tech people, who can both acknowledge the promise of technology and know the criticisms and how we went wrong and how we can shape it and regulate it. This unregulated tech that's serving unfettered capitalism has not helped the environment and the people. And I think I bring these three qualities of social justice organizing, tech experience, and being a millennial, a member of the future generation. I think we need a seat at the table for all these crises that have been long in the making.
And so what can people do that want to help support your campaign?
So you can go to my website. It's agathaforcongress.com. We'll be revamping it, but for now, you can check it out, follow us on social media. Please donate. We talked about money in politics, and for now, it's still the unfortunate truth that the strength of a campaign is based on small dollar donations. So if you feel compelled, please donate. And also volunteer with us. We have a sign-up sheet, and we'll have lots for people to do over the coming months. Lastly, if you want to help build this technology, if this excites you, collaborate with us.
I love it. Thanks so much. And I hope this will be I guess this is our second conversation because we already did that one event. I hope this will be the second of many more conversations. Thank you so much for putting your name out there and getting these ideas out there and really pushing the conversation forward.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.